Hi, this is Ann V. Brady, and I'll be reading from my book, A New Beginning, the story of my adoption, life, and service. I would appreciate it if you would buy my book. I had gotten the diary for my birthday. I only wrote in it when something I considered important happened. My diary had a key. One day I decided to play a prank on my father. I had my diary open but closed it, handed it to him, and told him he could look at my diary if he could open it. Of course, I had locked the diary before I gave it to him, and he couldn't open it. I finally showed him that I was locking and unlocking the diary. He wasn't too happy with me, but he did laugh. Sometime during the summer, old friends of my parents, the Whites, visited us. They stayed about a week at a nearby hotel because they had 5 children. My mom and dad spent the week taking them around to different sites around New York City and Long Island. We took the White family to see the Statue of Liberty. We took my father's station wagon and drove to the ferry. The ferry took us to Liberty Island. We even got to go up into the crown of the Statue of Liberty. My dad told us that he was going to take the Whites to see the Empire State Building on another day. He also told us that he wouldn't be able to take us with him. I was disappointed because I wanted to see the Empire State Building. I loved reading. I enjoyed reading murder mysteries. My favorite authors were Agatha Christie and Carol Keene. I decided to read a new book by Ellery Queen. I found I enjoyed Ellery Queen not because the book was great, but because it had dirty language in it. What do you expect of a 13-year-old? When I was 13, I told my mother that I wanted hair dyed for my birthday. I didn't like that my hair was brown and not blonde anymore. My mother wouldn't buy me hair dye until I was 14. When I dyed my hair, it turned a brassy blonde with a sort of orange tinge to it. We tried different methods, shades of blondes to dye my hair. Unfortunately, my hair usually turned out day-glow orange or fiery red. Jim went to a private Catholic school. Jim was talented, and we went to see him in a high school play. West Side Story. He was one of the sharks. In his third year at high school, Jim decided to become a Marist brother. He went to the Cold Spring Preparatory School on the Hudson. One summer, Bob took me to Jones Beach. While Bob laid down a towel to get some sun, I went into the Atlantic Ocean and jumped waves. After a few minutes, I felt something prick my leg. I looked at my leg. It was covered in seaweed, but it still hurt. So I picked my leg to look at it and saw a hook in the seaweed stuck in my leg. When I saw this, I screamed bloody murder. Bob jumped up and came and picked me up. I told him what happened. He didn't see the hook as it had fallen out of my leg. Even so, we picked up everything and went to the car. Bob drove to the emergency room where I had to get a tetanus shot. At that time, my brother Bob was at college. Bob went to Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. Bob dated a lot of girls at that time. In fact, one night he brought over 3 different girls at different times to meet the family. The first girl he brought over to meet the family was Sue Struckbon. She was a brunette. The second girl he brought over about an hour later was Rachel, pronounced Rochelle. She was a redhead. An hour later, Bob brought over Betty. She was a blonde. After that, Bob started dating Betty exclusively. One nice thing while they were dating was that if they went to the drive-in movies, they would take me with them, even though they didn't have to. My parents took me to see Teresa Brewer in concert. I don't remember the exact year. She was a great entertainer. She had a lot of energy for someone so small. It was a great concert. My favorite song was Put Another Nickel in the Nickelodeon. During the winter, I enjoyed skating. I finally graduated from wearing skates with 2 blades to skates with 1 blade. While I enjoyed skating, I had weak ankles. We had to buy ice skates that were very stiff. Pam and I used to play in the snow making snow angels and building snowmen. In 1968, my dad decided to quit his job at Chubb and Son as a claims investigator. He wanted to go into business for himself. He went to a dealership school to become a Hess dealer. He liked Hess because they only sold gasoline. They didn't have a mechanic shop. He felt that since he wasn't mechanically inclined, if he had to hire mechanics, he couldn't tell if they knew their job or if they were ripping customers off. I was in seventh grade currently. Dad made me his bookkeeper. I handled the payroll, balancing his business checkbook, and inventory. I did daily, weekly, and monthly inventory using an adding machine. Dad had an accountant that did his taxes for the business. I received $40 a week. Dad's first gas station was in the Bronx. He had to keep the station running 24 hours, which he didn't like because the station was in a bad neighborhood. During this time period, we used to watch the Smothers Brothers show and later Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. I loved watching both, not just for the comedy, but for their take on social issues and politics. The Smothers Brothers show had George Carlin on the show as the hippy-dippy weatherman, and Pat Paulson was always running for president. I also enjoyed Tommy Smothers as the Yo-Yo Man. He was impressive. The combination of music and comedy to me was great. Rowan Martin's Laugh-In made fun of life at the time and politics. I especially loved the Flying Fickle Finger of Fate award. It was always appropriately awarded. Skits like Here Come the Judge and Artie Johnson as a dirty old man after spinster Ruth Buzzy were fun to watch. I loved Lily Tomlin as the telephone operator. In seventh grade, our teachers were Sister Frances Eileen and Sister Marion Patrick. Sister Frances Eileen taught math and science. Sister Marion Patrick taught English and religion. Sister Marion Patrick also taught choir. Sister Marion Patrick was also known as MP because she was exacting and strict. Sister MP always told us that we were the worst class she ever had. The bad thing about Sister Marion Patrick was that because she was our religion teacher, she expected all our English essays to be on religious topics. One such topic was that if we had 3 wishes that we would wish for, I wrote the essay and turned it in. One such topic was that if we had 3 wishes, what would we wish for? I wrote the essay and turned it in. When I got it back, Sister Marion Patrick had given me an A on the essay. She wrote after the A that she couldn't understand a word that I had written in the essay because my handwriting was so bad. I showed it to my family and we wondered if she couldn't read my essay, how could she give me an A? Sister Frances Eileen was more interesting and engaging in science and math subjects. Sister Marion Patrick would tell us horrible stories. One such story was about a woman who was sick in the hospital. A priest who wanted to give her the last rites visited her. The woman had been married and got divorced. After she got divorced, she remarried, and according to the church, she was living in sin. The woman was dying, and the priest told her that if she wanted absolution, she would have to confess her sin and promise that if she lived, she would live with her husband as brother and sister. The woman refused and turned away from the priest. When the woman turned back to look at the priest, she had the face of the devil, and then she died. These are the types of stories that Sister Marion Patrick loved to tell us. Our art teacher was a layperson. One day she told us about an art exhibit that was going to be in the basement of the school. She wanted all of us students to draw pictures, put our names on the back and our grade, and then submit them to her, and she would decide which pictures would be in the art exhibit. She also told us she would return any pictures not an exhibit, to us immediately. All the students were extremely excited and worked hard on our art projects. Sister Mary and Patrick collected our pictures to give to the art teacher. When time came for the art exhibition, we were all excited as the art teacher hadn't returned any of our pictures. Many of us were really upset and confused and hurt when none of our pictures were in the art exhibit. The next time we had an art class, we asked the art teacher about our pictures. We asked why they weren't in the exhibit and why we never got the pictures back. The art teacher told us that she never received our pictures. Later that day, Sister Mary and Patrick told us that she decided our pictures weren't good enough. So she never gave them to the art teacher and just threw them out. Sister Mary and Patrick had our class write an essay on what we wanted to be when we grew up. I wrote about wanting to be a nun. One of the girls, Suzanne, wrote that she wanted to be a priest. Sister Mary and Patrick was upset. She yelled at Suzanne that she couldn't be a priest because it just simply was not done. Sister Mary and Patrick said that the Catholic Church didn't allow women to become priests. The Sisters of Charity changed their habits from the long black habits to short navy habits. They went down to their knees. That year in 7th grade, the nuns also decided to measure everybody's uniforms, make sure they at least went to the knee and weren't too short. They went to each girl and measured using a tape measure. Those girls that had dresses that were too short were told they had to buy new uniforms. We were informed that our uniforms were changing from the dark green ugly uniform we wore to a blue plaid skirt, white cotton shirt with a Peter Pan collar, and a navy blue bow tie. Because we only had 2 years to go before we graduated, the only girls getting the new uniform were the girls whose uniforms were too short. 2 horrible things happened in 1968. The first was the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4th, and the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy on June 6th, immediately after winning the California primary while giving his victory speech. The world lost 2 great men in 1 year. Mr. King helped to advance civil rights for African Americans. Everyone should be treated equally. I was watching Mr. Kennedy's speech when he was shot on TV. I was terribly upset about him getting shot, as I thought he would have made a good president. That year, we also received confirmation. I chose as my confirmation name Teresa, for St. Teresa of the Little Flower. The girls wore dresses and sat in the pews on the left side of the church. The boys sat in the pews on the right side of the church. All the children had to fill out index cards with their names and the saint they chose for their confirmation name. One of the girls tried to start a fight with me. Her name was Ronnie, and she was upset that she thought that I had taken Veronica as my confirmation name because that was her name. I explained to her that my middle name was Veronica and that my confirmation name was Teresa. His Excellency Bishop Killenberg presided over giving us confirmation. After we handed in the index cards, confirmation commenced. As our names were called, we lined up. Then we proceeded up the aisle towards the altar, knelt in front of the bishop, kissed his ring, and told him our confirmation name. Then he blessed us and confirmed us. Then we rose and went back to our pew. It was a long ceremony with all our families watching us, so no one dared make a wrong move. It was a beautiful ceremony, but boring. In the fall, we visited Jim at Cold Spring Preparatory School on the Hudson, and he showed me a snake he had found in the woods. He had kept the snake in an empty glitter tube. When we took it home, we got a glass jar, punched holes in the lid, and put the snake on top of rocks in the jar. I tried not to touch the snake as we didn't know if it was poisonous or not. I fed the snake flies and insects that I collected. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough and the snake died. In the winter, we visited Jim at Cold Spring Preparatory School on the Hudson. We decided that we were going to sled down the hill on the snow. My brother Jim was in the front, I was in the middle, and my dad brought up the rear on the toboggan. We went sliding down a hill and over a pond straight into a barbed wire fence. Jim had cuts all over his face and hands. I bounced up in the air and landed on my leg, which I was sure was broken. I started crying, and my father yelled at me, telling me that my leg wasn't broken. We brought the toboggan back up to where we had started, and Jim and I decided we were going to go down the hill once again. My dad refused to go down with us. He thought we were nuts. Jim moved where we were going to start from to make sure we didn't hit the fence again. We took off down the hill, this time successfully without any new injuries and scrapes. On one of Jim's trips home, Jim offered me a cigarette. He did this in front of our mom while we were sitting in the kitchen. I took a few puffs and handed the cigarette to him. Jim then said, "Ronnie, don't ever start smoking." The weird thing is that when my dad quit smoking, both my brothers started to smoke. Sometimes between August of 1967 and August of 1969, Betty took me and my best friend Pamela to see the movie Thoroughly Modern Millie at Radio City Music Hall in New York City for my birthday. We rode the train in from Wilston Park train station. First, we went to see St. Patrick's Cathedral. While we were in the cathedral, we paused by a picture of Mary and stopped to look at it and pray. After we left St. Patrick's Cathedral, we went directly to Radio City Music Hall. Before the movie began, we got to see the Rockettes. Pam and I had fun and appreciated the fact that Betty took us to see the movie. I've always liked Julie Andrews. I thought she was great in the movie. To me, it was the best birthday present ever. In eighth grade, we had to write a poem with religious meaning. I wrote my first poem and submitted it for a grade. The poem was called Brotherhood. Brotherhood. What is brotherhood? It is loving your neighbor no matter who he is, helping him even though you're not up to it. Brotherhood is more than just a word. It is love in action. Sister Marion Patrick told us that as the graduating class, we would be able to perform a skit at the end of the year before we graduated. We told us that we needed to work on what kind of program we were going to do and present it with her before we did it. The whole class decided that the theme of our program would be the Roaring Twenties. We worked tirelessly when we weren't studying and working in class on what we were going to include in the program. During that time, I had decided that I was going to Mineola High School instead of a Catholic school. We had several skits, such as a Charlie Chaplin skit, a speakeasy skit, and other similar types of skits. The other eighth grade class was upset with us because we chose the Roaring Twenties and they wanted to do it. They ended up choosing nursery rhymes. I played a small part in some of the skits. After the show, I wasn't feeling well, so I met my parents in the audience and we left. Unfortunately, my gun belt and my toy cap pistols on the I left my, Unfortunately, I left my gun belt and my toy cap pistols on the stage. My parents went back to look for the props the next day. Unfortunately, they had disappeared. I was out of school for the next week, so I was unable to go on the school outing. The eighth grade class went to the New York World's Expo Center. My class didn't forget me as they brought me prizes that they had won, including a goldfish and a ball. I was well enough to graduate with my class, and my parents had a big party after my graduation. I was glad that the school was finally over. After Bob and his friends, Tim and Paul, graduated from Marist College, they decided to enlist in the military. In 1969, they tried to enlist in the Navy, but Bob had a hard time passing the color test, even with his friends Fitzy trying to help him. Bob had no idea that he was colorblind. Bob and his friends then tried to enlist in the Army. Bob and his four friends were able to enlist in the Army and went to Fort Dix for basic training. They all planned to go to OCS, Officers Candidate School. While they were all stationed at Fort Dix, the Army kept trying to talk them out of going to OCS. The Army went as far as to offer one of his friends that if he dropped out of going to OCS, he wouldn't have to go to Vietnam and he would stay there at Fort Dix for the duration of his duty. During this time, on July 16, 1969, astronauts Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins went up in Apollo 11 to try to land on the moon. On July 20th, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon in the lunar module, the Eagle. I got to stay up late to watch the moon landing on TV as it was a Friday night. His friend Paul took the Army up on their offer and decided not to go to OCS. Paul ended up going to Arlington National Cemetery a week before Bob and Betty got married. Bob and his friend Fitzy went to OCS after they graduated from basic training at Fort Dix. My parents and I went to see Bob graduate from OCS at Fort Benning, Georgia in July. Bob drove back with us. He was looking forward to getting home and his wedding with Betty on August 4th. When we got back from Georgia, we went to pick up our dog Tammy from the kennel. Tammy looked horrible. Her tawny fur looked matted, and she almost looked like she had been beaten. At first, she wouldn't come to us, but then she crawled to us with her tail wagging. One day, Tammy ran away, and we had to look around town. We finally found her, but she looked like she had been hit by a car. We took her to see a vet to see what was wrong. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with her, but they treated her, and she seemed fine. Bob and Betty got married at St. Agnes Cathedral in Rockville Center, New York. Betty was an incredibly beautiful bride, and Bob looked distinguished. The ceremony was incredibly beautiful. I was a bridesmaid, and Jim was the best man. Later at the reception, my brothers and my dad were looking at Playboy bunnies on a deck of cards. I asked if I could look at the cards. Jim told me I was too young to look at them. Then my dad told Jim that it was nothing I hadn't already seen. My dad told him that I had been reading his Playboy magazines in the attic since I was 13. I didn't realize my father knew that I looked at the jokes, which I thought were pretty funny. Jim looked at me funny, but that shut him up quick. We had fun at the reception and danced a lot. I always dance in my stocking feet even to this day. I hate wearing heels. I can barely walk in them and sometimes always manage to kick myself in the ankle while walking. Wearing heels, like wearing dresses, I only wear them when it's absolutely required. It was during this time my mom had to take Tammy to the vet while I was at school. Tammy had gotten sick again. When I got home, my mother informed me that they had to put Tammy down. The vet had told her that they could keep treating Tammy, but Tammy would never get better. It was more of a kindness to put the dog to sleep. I was almost inconsolable as I loved that dog. It wasn't long before Bob and Betty had to go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where he would be stationed. Bob was the first lieutenant in the infantry. They lived off post. They got a dog. They named him Smack. We visited them down there in North Carolina in the fall. They took us to a beautiful lake where Bob decided he was going to take a dip. He didn't stay in the water long as it was freezing. My dad had problems with the gas station in the Bronx and was looking to get a gas station anywhere else. One night, someone stole from the safe in the back room of the gas station. My father went ahead and filed a police report and filed a claim with the insurance company. The insurance company refused to pay because there was no outward sign of the break into the safe except for some scratches. The night manager had used a fishhook to break into the safe. There was a roll around above a slot at the top of the safe. He pushed the roll around until the slot was viewable, then sunk the fishhook through the slot to pick up the money bag and remove it from the safe. The night manager, Ray, was the uncle of two of the police officers that were investigating the burglary. Both came to my father and apologized for their uncle. Unfortunately, the uncle had disappeared and couldn't be found by any of the police. My father then decided to get a dog from the pound. He got a German Shepherd named Pierre. He was told that Pierre was not good with children. Pierre is the only dog I was scared of. He would let the mailman into the back office and not let him out. My dad would have to grab Pierre by the collar so the mailman could leave. One day, a male customer was getting a drink of water when my dad returned from taking Pierre for a walk. Customer started to pet Pierre. My father told him that the dog would bite. Customer ignored my father and Pierre bit his hand. The customer threatened him with a lawsuit. My father told him to go ahead, that he'd warned him the dog would bite him and that he shouldn't pet the dog. My father called the head of the company and insisted that they find him a new gas station in a different location. He was upset with them because they had consistently given gas stations to other people ahead of him, even though he asked first. Hess finally gave him a new gas station in Connecticut. Before my father left the Bronx station, one of the local merchants he knew gave him a black Labrador female puppy. It was from a litter of pups her dog had just birthed. Jim and I named her Bash because we had Smack living with us. When my mother went to the vet to get Bash her shots and have a checkup, she lied and told them that Bash's name was Bashful because she was embarrassed by the dog's name. The one advantage of having a gas station in Connecticut was that they had to close at 10 o'clock every night. The one great thing about him having the Hess gas station in Connecticut was that I could ride up with him on weekends. I would ride up on Saturday and put gas in our car, and he'd pay whoever was working the pumps. Most fun was before Christmas. I would help one of the workers set up the Christmas display. It would be pre-wrapped boxes that we set up pyramid style in the front office. We would sell Hess trucks to customers as gifts for the kids for Christmas. Every year, Hess would come out with new trucks. They were green and white with the Hess logo on the side. They were made of sturdy plastic. The parts on it were movable, battery operated, and the lights worked. One year, I was miffed at a woman. I didn't say anything to her. I just sold her the truck. She came in with her daughter to buy a truck for a Christmas present for her son. Her daughter mentioned that she wanted a truck too. Her mother told her she couldn't have one because girls just didn't play with trucks. I wanted to tell her that I've grown up playing with both dolls, trucks, toy soldiers, doll houses, and I turned out fine. I told my dad about it later. One of the workers at the station would help me break up the decorated boxes after Christmas was over. We would jump up and down on the boxes to crush them. It was a lot of fun. One day, one of the boys that worked for my dad asked him if it would be all right for me to ride on the back of his motorcycle. He promised that he would go slow and just ride me around the gas station area. This is the first time I'd ever been on a motorcycle. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I wasn't wearing a helmet. I held on to him for dear life. I used to give my father massages. I would massage his neck and back. I've always been good at giving massages and still am. Sometimes, instead of massaging his back, I would trace letters of the alphabet on his back in cursive. Occasionally, my father would try to return the favor by massaging my back. Unfortunately, I am extremely ticklish, and he would get upset when I would start laughing and squirming as soon as he started to massage my back. I still give massages on occasion. My father would get upset when he thought I was laughing at him. I had to explain that my skin is extremely sensitive and ticklish, so when I rubbed my back, it tickled. He stopped trying to massage my back. I have never been able to do it for too long before my hands start to cramp up. It's due to how hard I massage the muscles I need and rub the shoulders and neck. And that's it for today, that's the end of chapter 2. I hope you appreciate my story. I hope it's interesting. I hope you buy my book. Below is links to Amazon.com to buy my book, A New Beginning, the story of my adoption, life and center. I would appreciate if you would buy it, and I hope you all have a nice weekend.